Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The opening ceremony is about to start. Please be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The opening ceremony is about to start. Please be seated.
Testing, testing. Testing, testing.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Victoria Lee, Assistant Dean for Student Affairs.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Victoria Lee, Assistant Dean for Student Affairs at the University of Macau Federation of Arts and Humanities. I'm a member of SISTEX. Also, I'm the president of the Macau Federation for Translators and Interpreters. Very happy to see you here, distinguished scholars and ladies and gentlemen. I cannot help feeling emotional. Time flies here. Yes, and I get to see so many of my heroes here, all in this room. Right, so, and I'm so excited to see old friends and new friends. Right, so now let's invite Professor Stephen Lee, distinguished professor for Translation Studies, and also Director of SISTEX of the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, University of Macau, and also Director of SISTEX, to deliver a welcome speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, friends, guests, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, friends, a very warm welcome guests, to all very of you. Welcome to good morning to all of you, and welcome a very warm welcome to all of you. Welcome to Macau, and great honor and touch University of Nostalgia. That I stand before you. So it is with great honor and touch of nostalgia that I stand before you to open the 10th conference on cognitive research, not only the 10th anniversary for the Center of this occasion marks not only the 10th anniversary at the University of Macau of Studies of Translation, Interpreting, Cognition at the University of Macau, but also the 10th which was anniversary of this set up in 2014, which was launched, but also the 10th anniversary of this. So over the past decade, which was launched in the same year, so over the past decade, our extraordinary has witnessed an unprecedented growth to the collective extraordinary evolution. Educators and practitioners to the collective efforts of researchers, educators, and practitioners who have dedicated their careers to unraveling the complexities of. So the journey has been marked by exciting and interesting advancements in our. So the journey has been marked by exciting and interesting advancements in our understanding of how the human mind navigates the intricate landscape of language transfer. Evidence. We have from anecdotal speculative theories, sophisticated evidence, from anecdotal observations to sophisticated neuroimaging studies that our field has been enriched by the interdisciplinary approach. So our field has been enriched by the psychology, neuroscience, borrowing theories and methodologies from psychology, other things, neuroscience, linguistics, pollination, computer science, of ideas, among many other things. To this cross-pollination of ideas has led to a more nuanced or a deeper understanding of the cognitive mechanisms at play the summer schools we have conducted at Wuhan University of Technology. Over the summer schools we have conducted at Wuhan University of Technology over the past 2 years, and the International Association of Translation have been interpreting and cognition in nurturing the next generation of have been instrumental in nurturing the next generation in this part researchers. These intensive programs, at least in this part of the world, these intensive programs have provided a fertile ground for the exchange of ideas and the development of research skills. Many of the participants have since become key contributors to the field. Educational testament to the quality and impact of these educational initiatives. And I'm very happy to see many summer training schools participants are here today with us. And the boot camp, summer training schools are here today with us. Professor Victoria Lei. And the boot camp on translation process research has been Professor Victoria Lei in 2016 or 2017 has been a game changer in a sense. It has not only honed the research capabilities of its participants, but also fostered a community of scholars dedicated to advancing the frontiers of cognitive translation studies. And again, many participants of that the most important are here today among us. As I said, you have become the most important research caliber in so our contributions to the field are useful. Research being not very so our contributions to the field are useful. A part of a larger, being not very modest here. The real credit goes to the leaders, part of a larger leadership of distinguished. The real credit goes to the leaders overseas or the leadership of distinguished professors, vision from local and overseas institutions. The collective efforts whose vision and the researchers have been pivotal. Have been the collective efforts of the researchers present here today have been the driving force behind our collective achievements. As we look to the future, we do so with a sense of optimism and determination. The challenges ahead in this very area of artificial intelligence are as complex as they are exciting. But if the past decade is any indication, we are well equipped to meet them head on. Let us continue to build on the momentum of the past with our eyes firmly set on the horizon of the future. Together, we will push the boundaries of cognitive translation studies, ensuring that our field remains at the cutting edge of academic inquiry and practical application. So thank you for your attention, and let the proceedings of this conference serve as a beacon for the next decade of cognitive research in translation and interpreting. I wish you all a great time here at the conference and a great time here in Macau. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor De-Feng Li. Please be seated. Now let's invite
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, my dearest friends, Professor Li De-Feng and Professor Zhong Weiho and everybody. So it's very happy, it's my honor to be here to attend that is a 10th International Conference on Cognitive Research on Translation and Interpreting. So I remember 10 years ago, I also attended the first international conference here. So really, it left a fresh memory, a sweet memory. So over the past years, Professor Li and his research group has made, I think, a very big succeeds. So that is the bigger research group and also the big achievements. So I think everybody here has seen or noticed this evidence. So today, the 10th International Conference on Cognitive Research on Translation and Interpreting. I think this is a new stage or new area for this period. So today, I'd like to say something about what I have studied or what I think about cognitive translation studies. So that's the scientific and humanistic nature of cognitive translation or interpreting studies. So I will just say something about the cognitive foundations of translation studies and also the scientific nature of cognitive translation studies or the humanistic nature of cognitive translation studies, and also the future, maybe the future of this field. So translation and interpreting, of course, are complex cognitive tasks involve not only linguistic shift, but also culture, contextual, and emotional sensitivity. So while the linguistic aspects of this task has been extensively studied, there has been growing interest in understanding the cognitive processes that underlie them. But cognitive translation and interpreting applies insights from cognitive science or cognitive neuroscience to explore the mental mechanisms involved in these activities. So it's very necessary for us to interpret the scientific nature and also humanistic natures of cognitive translation and interpreting. So, as to the scientific nature, I'd like to explain, for example, the empirical research in cognitive translation and interpreting. So especially the experiential methods such as behaviorist experience, neurocognitive techniques, and also computational modeling. So recently, especially with the development of AI, so I think AI technologies has given us so many implications for translation studies. So, and also, I'm very happy to see there are some achievements made by the scholars in this field. For example, Professor Zhong, President Zhong, and Li, and also I'd like to mention one professor, that is Wang Xiang. Okay, so she will have the book published by the commercial press on AI and translation. Okay. Now, over the past years, so the scientific nature of cognitive translation and interpretation just is reflections of some, for example, some cognitive processes, especially in simultaneous and consecutive interpreting. And also, there are cognitive models in translation and interpreting. For example, the information processing model and the dual task paradigm, and also the data-driven methods and communicational approach. Now, as to the cultural sensitivity, the humanistic nature of cognitive translation and interpreting, I'd like to mention some points. For example, empathy and translators and interpreter rules, so especially the human connections in translation and interpreting. So at the heart of translation and interpreting is the ability to convey meaning not just accurately, but also in a way that's resonance with the target audience. So this requires empathy. So that is, we should empathetic, for example, with the audience, right? Audience, and the ability to understand the emotional and cultural context of both the source and target text. And then another, that is cultural sensitivity and also cultural awareness. So that's the translator and interpreters as a cultural mediators, okay? And then the ethnic or cultural mediation, so it is also very important for cognitive translation studies, so to consider the ethnics. So cultural sensitivity in translation and interpretation also raises important ethnic questions. So for example, the cultural differences challenge their ethnic responsibility. So especially in nowadays, we know there's a crazy world, so it's very important for us to consider the ethnic issues. And also the creativity in translation and interpreting. So the creativity process of translation has also studied by the Chinese scholars and also some other international, I think some other scholars. So creativity also is an important topic for translation and interpreting. And also the translator's voice. So what's your right, your voice, or your attitude, or your values, right, to the translation. So also it should be considered. And another, so I'd like to mention, so that is confidentiality and accuracy. So as to the ethic aspect translation, so is a responsibility to maintain confidentiality and also ensure accuracy. So confidentiality, so especially when we translate something such as legal, medical, and diplomatic interpretation or translation, so it's very important for us to keep the confidentiality. So in order to establish the well-known, so that's cognitive translation studies, so it's very important for us to have a holistic understanding what this discipline is and what we should do in the future. So thank you, Professor Li Defeng, for giving me a very good chance for us to express my idea. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Professor Wen Xu. Professor Wen Xu is the author of numerous important works, including the Routledge Handbook of Cognitive Linguistics. Thank you. And now let's invite Professor Zhongwei He, President of Macau Millennium University, also Honorary President of the Guangdong Association of Translators, and also eminent scholar in translation and interpreting studies, a great practitioner and trainer. Thank you.
Distinguished professors, Professor Li Defeng, Professor Daniela Gila, an old friend, and a very distinguished professor in the field of interpreting studies and a pioneer of interpreting studies in the world, and Professor Wen Xu, Professor Chen Jing, Professor Zheng Binghan, and Professor Zhu Xianlong. Colleagues, speakers of today, good morning. First and foremost, I would like to express my sincere congratulations to the Center for the Studies of Translation, Interpreting and Cognition at the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, University of Macau, on organizing this excellent conference. I would also like to be, on behalf of the Translators Association of Guangdong Province, one of the co-organizers of this conference, to extend our warmest welcome to all the participants of this conference. Now, please allow me to introduce myself a little bit. My experience in the field of translation and interpreting began as one of the pioneer conference interpreters in South China, dated back in the early 1990s. As an educator, I had the privilege of training a generation of students who became the original top conference interpreters and researchers, effectively ending the practice of having to recruit interpreters from Beijing or the other big cities for international events in South China at that time. During my tenure at Guangdong University of Foreign Studies, I dedicated myself to interpreting training, research, and the development of interpreting and translation studies as an independent discipline. after more than 7 years of serving as president of Guangdong University of French Studies, I quitted from my position to take on a new challenge as the president of the Kinggood Group. This transition gave me valuable insights into how industries can effectively blend with education and research to create innovative synergies. Now, I have the honor of serving as the president of Macao Millennium College, where I continue my commitment to advancing interpreting and translation studies, while also pioneering the development of intelligent language service as a new discipline. This integration of traditional translation studies with digital intelligence represents our response to the evolving demands of the language service industry in the age of artificial intelligence. At this juncture, I would like to extend my warmest congratulations to Professor Li Defeng and his outstanding team at the Center for Studies of Translation, Interpreting, and Cognition. A decade ago, with Professor Li, initiated this conference here at the University of Macau. Perhaps very few people could have foreseen how it would grow into one of the most influential platforms for cognitive translation research in the world. Through 9 successful iterations across China's prestigious institutions, and now returning to its birthplace for this 10th anniversary. This conference has consistently pushed the boundaries of our field. Professor Li, your vision and leadership have not only created a vital platform for academic exchange, but have also significantly advanced our understanding of translation cognition. This achievement deserves our highest recognition and appreciation. So while I received the invitation from Professor Li Defeng, I accepted without hesitation, not only because of my respect for Professor Li, but also because I think the theme of translation cognition and brain science research particularly resonates with our mission at Macau Millennium College to develop intelligent language services as a new discipline. The journey of this conference reflects the growth of cognitive translation research in our region. With Professor Li initiated this conference here at the University of Macau in the year 2014. He envisioned the platform where scholars could explore the cognitive dimensions of translation and interpreting. That vision has flourished magnificently, from Beijing Foreign Studies University to Renmin University, from Southwest University to Wuhan University of Technology, and more recently at Chongqing University. Each iteration has contributed to advancing our understanding of translation cognition. Today, we return to where it all began, making a decade of scholarly achievement. As someone who has witnessed the evolution of translation studies over decades, I can say with conviction that we are standing at transformative moment in our field. The integration of neuroscience with translation studies is not merely adding another dimension to our research. It is fundamentally revolutionizing our understanding of the translators' and interpreters' minds. Consider how far we have come. From theoretical models of translation processes, we can now observe in real time how the bilingual brain manages competing language systems, how it resolves cognitive conflicts, and how it orchestrates the complex neural networks involved in cross-linguistic transfer. The application of neuroimaging techniques such as fMRI and EEG, combined with eye tracking and other psychometric measurements, is finally allowing us to validate or change long-held assumptions about translation and interpreting processes that we could previously only theorize about. What particularly intrigues me is how this new frontier of research might reshape our approach to translator and interpreting training. When we understand the neural mechanisms and distinguish expert translators and the novices, or when we can map the cognitive load patterns during simultaneous interpreting, we can develop more targeted and effective pedagogical approaches. This research takes on even greater urgency in our current context. We are witnessing an era where artificial intelligence has targeted translation interpreting as its first fortress to conquer in the realm of human cognitive tasks. Large language models now claim near-human performances in translation and interpreting, and AI companies are boldly predicting the automation of simultaneous interpreting. Yet, this very challenge makes our research into human cognitive process more crucial than ever. Understanding how human translators and interpreters process language, manage cognitive load, and navigate cultural nuances will not only help us enhance human performance, but also reveal those uniquely human aspects of translation and may prove inimitable by machines. Our research into translation, cognition, and neuroscience may well hold the key to defining the irreplaceable role of human translators and interpreters in an AI-augmented future. Once again, I express my deepest gratitude to the organizers for orchestrating this remarkable gathering of minds at such a pivotal moment in our fields of evolution. May this 10th anniversary conference not only celebrate our past achievements, but also illuminate new pathways for the future of interpreting and translation studies. Thank you all, and I wish you a most productive conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Zhong Weihe. Right, so this is the legendary interpreter #1 of South China. Right, actually, also sitting here, we have interpreter #1 of East China, Professor Chen Jing, who is going to speak to us as a keynote speaker later. Right. Actually, in these 2 days, heroes of mine are going to walk up to the stage and speak to you one by one. Right, but before that, I think we should, we can conclude our opening ceremony by taking group photos. We'll take 2 group photos. The first group photos, we invite the officiating guests to come to the stage to take a photo. And then afterwards, we all sit in our own seats and take another group photo. Right. So, Professor Lee, could you invite officiating guests to the stage to take a group photo together? Okay, group photo first. Okay, I was following instruction from Mr. Chen Yiqiang, my colleague. And now we invite the officiating guests to come to the stage to take a group photo together.
Do I have to stand in front of us to hide it a little bit?
Yeah.
Because they can't move it.
You're going to break the auditorium.
Yeah.
I think they come up. So where do you want to stand it from?
Yeah, 往后面，对，小心点啊。好吧。
Right, now we can have, we can just take a break for 5 minutes, very short break. Relax a little bit. We are doing the setup for the first keynote session.
Lian
你看这
怎么黑了？这个是可以连的吧？我直接 beginning 了。是在这儿演练一遍，还是投过去？
就要投出来，要投出来。
那还没投上。
对，现在还没有信号。
哦，这可以。
要先试一下。
OK。
还在
哦，那个翻页的呢？哦，在这儿，是吧？
翻页笔看到没有？我们要试一下翻页笔，然后要告诉教授，他上来的时候你就跟他说一下哪一个是翻页的。
我现在开了，哪一个按键是翻页的？
我不知道哎。
没事，让我 try 一下。
连接那个。
对，我已经连上了，
翻页是按哪一个嘞？
就是你都可以试一下，你现在有声音，它已经连上了。
哦，是这样。OK。
对，
这个就行，按这个就行。
We are doing the setup.
And you can use this.
Yes, okay, that's the right one. We will also try the pointer for your convenience.
没有。
Yeah, it's okay.
Wait a second.
看看这个能不能投过去？
对，我会试一下。
啊？你在试什么？
就是那个投影那个，不是，就是那个屏幕的投影，它有一个那个什么布置的那个在哪？project 可以找到吗 ？project 对啊，是布置，那就不对，
没有啊，雨生那个
投上吗？
谁买呀？你问一下，我找一下 Ricky。
它有很多吗？
需要我打电话叫他们那个技术人来吗？等一下，我问一下。
还是不行。
你换一个别的吧，试一下。PC screen 呢
？PC screen 就只有这个了。
哦 ，second screen 呢？打个 ICTO 的电话让我问一下。
你重新连一下。
我已经连过了，你看这个连上的。
这个大
没有。
不行的话要重新全拔掉再来，好吧？还有。
换一个之后是那个2，衣服跟这儿都一样，
哎，这个有，行，那好。
是放中间是吧？
这个笔拿着吗？这个笔是拿着吗？讲讲。
是哪个是分？你试一下。左右是吧？
对，左右。
还有那个激光是吧？
对，激光，对，这个应该是激光，对，激光。OK。
这个放到。
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, the first session of keynote speeches is about to start. And now let's invite Professor Zhu Xianlong, Dean of School for International Studies, South China University for Technology, to chair the session. Professor Zhu, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor to be part of the 10th anniversary conference. So first I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to Professor Li Defeng for his invitation to invite me to chair the first two keynote speeches. Also, it's my privilege to introduce to you Professor Daniel Jill. Is that right? Jill or Ji-er, okay, Chinese. As we know, Professor Jill is a legendary scholar in the world in the fields of translation and linguistics. And with a rich and varied professional background, Professor Jill stands out as a distinguished academic who has held prestigious positions at leading universities worldwide. And his contributions to the field of translation studies are both significant and far-reaching. And today, Professor Jill will share his profound insights with us on a topic that is both timely and important. The title is Operationalizing the Measurement of Cognitive Load. The subject is crucial for understanding the translation processes. So please join me in extending a warm welcome to Professor Daniel Jill. Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm looking at time. As an interpreter, I don't like to take too much time because interpreters are looking for some relief, especially with boring speakers like myself. So I have 25 minutes, and I'll see what happens. Okay. Just one idea in this whole talk. So you just listen for 1 minute. The question is, you have to choose the right minute. First of all, hello everyone. I thank you very much, Defong, for this invitation. I'm very happy to be here again. And I must say I'm very impressed by what I've been seeing. Not only the work that comes from your students, your colleagues, but also overall in China. And everything that I've seen since I came here from talk with students and colleagues with such an open mind, there's true admiration. I can talk about it some other time, but really we in the West have a lot to learn from the way you interact. Open mind and dialogue, this is something that we sometimes miss. Okay, I'm not a trained psychologist. I am not a trained linguist. Actually, I could speak for 24 hours about what I am not. What I am is a research migrant. From a background in mathematics, I migrated into something, and I still feel like I'm still a migrant from interpreting practice, basically. And I will adopt this angle in my reflection, meaning that contrary to what happens with many other people, I will start not from theory and see whether theories apply, but I would like to describe what happens when an interpreter observes what happens in the field, then introspects, then speculates, and then looks at science, at theory, at experimental findings, empirical findings, and try to see critically what can be made with them. All of this as applied to cognitive load. Okay, so the facts. Interpreting is difficult. Will anyone challenge that who is an interpreter? So how do we know if there's anything that we know? Well, we know because interpreters feel the effortfulness of interpreting, because interpreters see that they often do not understand a source speech or part of a source speech, even when the language is simple, when they know the words, when the rhythm is okay, when they have enough extra linguistic knowledge, when the sound quality is good. For some strange reason, they don't understand. How come? Sometimes they cannot find the words fast enough to express an idea adequately while working in the booth. And sometimes they understand something that the speaker said, but by the time they would like to reformulate it or take it down in notes, it's gone. It's fallen in the sea. Is this familiar to anyone here who has done interpreting? I think it's probably familiar to all of us, except geniuses. And geniuses are asked to leave the room right away. Only normal people here. So such phenomena are very frequent. And they are, as soon as you look at empirical studies that shows data, authentic data, you find that this is true. At least the facts are true. And this is not due to lack of knowledge. It's due to something that we like to call, but it's a construct, cognitive difficulty. What we think is that some kind of what we call knowledge is stored in memory. Basically, you talk about linguistic knowledge, you talk about declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge. In declarative knowledge, you talk about knowledge of languages, extra-linguistic languages, even though it may not be as easy as all that to distinguish between the two. And there is procedural knowledge. In other words, somehow we know how to do things without being able to describe it. So this is stored in what we call memory, which again is a construct. I will stress that very often in cognitive science, we work with constructs rather than with actual physiological or electrical or chemical data. And this is why I welcome so much what is going on now, the new developments, because now we have the physical layer as well. So, knowledge is stored with actual memory, physiological or electrical doing or what needs to be done when you interpret I welcome so much what is to do something now, with the knowledge, because now we have the physical layer as well. And when interpreting, I think all knowledge is stored with actual memory, physiological, requires doing what needs to be done. When you interpret, I welcome so requires much just to do something spontaneously, with the knowledge. In some cases where things are very easy. Action layer as well. And when interpreting, I think all knowledge is stored with actual memory, physiological, requires doing what needs to be done. When you interpret, requires just to do something spontaneously, with the knowledge. In some cases where things are very easy. Action, I do say often. And when interpreting, I think all knowledge is stored with actual memory, physiological, requires doing what needs to be done. When you interpret, requires just to do something spontaneously, with the knowledge. In some cases, several times of action, I do say often. And when interpreting, I think all knowledge is stored with actual memory, physiological, required doing what needs to be done. Requires just to do something spontaneously, with the knowledge. In some cases, several to insufficient quality in objective terms, even though it is not necessarily perceived or even perceivable subjectively for a number of reasons. Actually, there are empirical studies, including a few that I carried out myself, that show that people do not have the required sensitivity or attention to actually note all the difficulties, all the weaknesses of the interpreting output that comes out of the booth. So there are questions. Are there special abilities, that is procedural knowledge, that is required to be up to the task? And if so, can these be acquired? So it's the big question that was asked a long, long time ago that is still being asked, and that some interpreting practitioners refuse to ask, whether interpreters are born, not made, or made, not born. Okay, cognitive science. In interpreting studies, initially it was mostly ignored, and then it existed. From the start, interpreters were aware of the cognitive difficulty of interpreting. I don't think that anyone doubts that. But for many years in the West, and why do I talk about the West as opposed to other parts of the world? Because this is where the institutionalization of interpreting studies started. This is where it really became powerful. And there are sociological issues, sociology of science issues that have nothing to do with truth or with intelligence or with anything like that. It just happened that way. So for many years, Western interpreting studies scholars said no to cognitive science, no to cognitive psychology, no to linguistics. They're not relevant, they don't know what they're talking about. The only ones who know what interpreting is all about are interpreters. That's what they claimed. You may be familiar with the name of Danica Seleskovich and her interpretive theory, which I have criticized from the start, but still I have to acknowledge that if it weren't for her, we wouldn't have interpreting studies, probably, unless somebody else took the initiative and had the drive and charisma and everything to really push things forward. So from the 1970s to the mid-90s, and dissenting voices were not heard at all. There were a few colleagues, not necessarily interpreters, who did turn to cognitive science, but their voices were silenced. This is one of the reasons why I like very much what I see here, because I see people who are experts in linguistics, experts in cognitive science, experts in all sorts of things, and everyone talks to each other. Nobody tries to silence the other one. Interestingly, interpretive theory, Seleskovich did make a very heavy cognitive claim without realizing it. They said that deverbalization occurs. I wonder if you've heard this term, which refers to some kind of state where when you listen, you understand, and then you get rid of any linguistic trace of the source text, of the source speech, and then you reformulate without any trace of the source language. But this is a very heavy claim. How can you prove that? They never tried to actually engage with it critically. So I think it's a very good idea to use this theory, this principle, as a heuristic, as something for training purposes, and I'll be quite happy to discuss with whoever wants to why I think it's good when training interpreters, but in terms of research, in terms of interpreting cognition, it doesn't make sense, and I think there's enough evidence now to show that it isn't so. Anyway, there was change that started in the 1990s. I know that now I'm getting very old, and most of you, for you, 1990s, maybe prehistory, but for me, it's, and now there is strong reliance on cognitive psychology, on linguistic analysis, and there are very interesting Chinese contributions. And in particular, I was very interested in material that came from Chinese scholars, for instance, who talked about dependency distance as a very easily measurable indicator of syntactic complexity and how it can be used. I mean, these are things that came from China. They were known in other places, but this is where you took the initiative. And there is growing interest in neural sciences and what they can contribute. Okay. I started getting interested in cognitive psychology a long time ago, and I found out about the existence of a distinction, which is, of course, a bit artificial, like any distinction made by humans. It's a construct between so-called automatic operations and non-automatic operations. And non-automatic operations require processing capacity. Sometimes they're called attentional resources or capacity or whatever, just a name. If it's not sufficient, then performance suffers. Either the tasks are slower, or they are not done correctly, or they're absent. Fine. So one day I was in the bathtub. I took a selfie of me. Here you can see it. And suddenly I found the soap. I said, Eureka, that's Greek. And I found the effort models when I saw the light. And the effort models are just a very simple, stupid idea, actually, that processing capacity, it's speculation, just speculation, that processing capacity is limited and shared between so-called efforts, I call them efforts, that could easily be identified by students. That was the idea. They are not cognitive entities. They are sets of tasks that are functionally grouped into listening, comprehension, short-term memory operations, etc., etc. Okay, so then I theorized about that, and the effort models account for many weaknesses in interpreting output. At least they offer accounts for many weaknesses, especially when considering what I call the tightrope hypothesis, namely the fact that we tend to work close enough to our limitations so that when something happens, then we're not able to perform the task completely. So this was a sort of explanation of something that I and many other people observed. Now, processing capacity is required to meet some demand, and the demand is associated with task performance at a certain quality level. You have to perform it fast enough, and it has to meet certain criteria. And this is where John Sweller, an instructional psychologist, developed cognitive load theory. And it seems that the term cognitive load comes from that theory, which is very interesting because it carries, now we still carry this heritage, talking about so-called intrinsic load, and even though it may not be the best thing to do for our purposes in interpreting studies. So, cognitive load, what is it exactly? In the literature, you find many different definitions, and basically there are two ways it is defined. One is that it's the cognitive demand of the task, how much capacity is required, or what proportion of one's attentional resources are busy. And the other one is, well, one is how much is required, and the second one is how much is actually engaged. So the overall idea was that the more resources are required or engaged, the higher cognitive load is. Okay, fair enough. That seems like a straightforward idea that is rather easy to accept. But if we want to actually measure it, we have to look at how this variable behaves as a variable. First of all, what is a task? John Sweller talked about tasks that involve maybe handling a machine or operating something. Is it the same thing if the task lasts a minute or an hour or a few days? Is the load the same? No, obviously not. If you have to drive a car from A to B, there is some cognitive load, but is it the same throughout the drive? What if we have to translate just a word? Not the same thing as regards to duration, or when we solve a mathematical problem, when we play a musical piece on the piano. So there are different durations. Also, over a certain duration, there are different degrees of difficulty during task performance. And also the difficulty depends on the person's knowledge and skills, what is stored in memory, including declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge. So what happens to the concept of intrinsic cognitive load? It may be intrinsic for one person at a given time under certain circumstances. If circumstances become more difficult, then it increases, even though it's the same task. So it varies from person to person, and for the same person, it may depend upon time and circumstances. So how convenient is that? How convenient is that construct as it is performed? It makes sense as a personal variable, but are we interested in personal variables of cognitive load? I think we should like to have something that is more invariable. I'll come to that. It's not at all comparable to something like lifting a weight. You lift a weight, it will be more or less difficult for persons, but there is the gravity, the pull of the Earth, of the mass of the Earth on an object is the same for everyone. If we could have this standard that is close to invariant, that would be probably more useful. So in instructional settings, when tasks are well defined, it's fine. I think John Sweller's cognitive load theory is fine. But what about translation, interpreting, cognition? What happens then? In interpreting, tasks vary from moment to moment. The density of information that arrives from the speech, the grammatical complexity of sentences, the quality of the sound, the frequency and length of lexical units are not the same. Also, tasks vary from one individual to another, depending on interpreting choices that you make. How will I interpret this sentence that just comes in? Will I start with the end of the sentence, with the beginning of the sentence? Will I cut it up? It depends on tactics, what people tend to call strategies. So think of problem triggers. Yes, true. You have to interpret. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, easy. Thank you very much for coming to this 144th meeting of the International Alliance of Grateful University of Macau banquet participants. Very difficult to translate. I dare you to translate it into Chinese in simultaneous. Here in this beautiful site in Macau. So, especially in the interpreter training context, what is required is a construct that takes on board these variations, that is as close to variable as possible, so that it can apply to populations of students or interpreters, not to individuals. Now, in interpreting studies, there is increasingly use of cognitive effort measurements as a proxy for cognitive load. And some colleagues from interpreting studies actually refuse to make a distinction between cognitive load and cognitive effort. But cognitive effort does not necessarily correlate well with the difficulty of the task, especially if you use a single indicator. I see lots of publications where people use just eye tracking or just frequency, voice frequency, or just this or just that. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't really make sense. You know that if you have COVID, you cough. But if you cough, does that mean you have COVID? Variations in effort probably do correlate reasonably well with the demand of the task over a certain range, medium range, but not when it's too low or when it's too difficult, because then there is disengagement. And engagement is very, very important in instruction when training interpreters and when trying to improve one's quality. And disregarding it leads to insufficient coverage of the difficulty of the task as it is. This is well known in psychology, but this was not taken on board. So, can we find something that will be more or less invariant? So we have the questionnaires, like the NASA Task Load Index questionnaire for cognitive load. It seems to be quite reliable, but it doesn't, it's just an approximation, and it doesn't take on board instant variations. And do we use performance as indicators? The correlation is not very good either, because performance results from knowledge plus cognitive skills plus effort plus engagement, motivation. So the sensitivity is weak and the reliability of performance assessment is also weak. We cannot draw conclusions on intrinsic cognitive load, on intrinsic task difficulty from performance alone or from effort indicators. So back to cognitive psychology and to the working memory construct, the idea is that working memory can only store and maintain a very small number of items at the same time. And in 2018, Shao did a PhD where she used the idea of information chunks. It was published in English by Shao and Chai in 2021, information chunks being a sequence of words or other meaning elements that are stored and retrieved whole from memory at the time of use. And this seemed to be pretty reliable. People subjective, intersubjective assessment seemed to be pretty good. So I thought this would be a very good candidate for informational cognitive load. So you would measure at any time the information chunks that are in memory, what was perceived from the source speech and what is yet to be interpreted, and see if there are thresholds where suddenly you see actual behavioral or physiological differences that imply that you reached a threshold. Looking at it in terms of effort, in terms of behavior, and looking at it in terms of neural activity. So, main ideas. For those of you who fell asleep, Defong, this is you. Cognitive effort is not cognitive load. Disengagement could play a crucial role, and measuring cognitive load in terms of information chunks with values, natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think holds some promise, and we should like to explore some patterns around it with behavior, with effort indicators, and with brain patterns. The big question, would Confucius have approved? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you. So due to our tight schedule, we just skipped the QA session, okay? Okay, thank you again for your enlightening lecture. And by distinguishing the cognitive load from cognitive effort and highlighting the importance of motivation and disengagement phenomena, Professor Jailer has provided invaluable insights for improving interpreting practice measurement methodology. And also the innovative concept of informational cognitive load and its measurement methodology offer a powerful tool to explore the interpreter's cognitive behavior when faced with the cognitive challenges. These ideas have truly sparked a wealth of thoughts and questions among us. Thank you again. Thank you. So let's proceed with the second group of keynote speeches. We have the pleasure of welcoming our distinguished professor, Professor Li Defeng, and Associate Professor Victoria Li Liqing, who will share their profound expertise and insights on the topic of bilingual advantage. Their presentation will draw from longitudinal fMRI study integrating neuroimaging and behavioral data to provide a comprehensive understanding of this subject. And Professor Li Defeng is old from Man and also a legendary scholar in the world. In the field of translation studies, and he has held prestigious positions at leading academic institutions and has made significant contributions to various aspects of translation research, including neurocognitive and psycholinguistics investigations of translation processes and corpus applications in translation studies, curriculum and material development in translation education, and specialized translation. And following Professor Li Defeng, we have Associate Professor Victoria Li Liqing, who is a highly active researcher and educated in the interdisciplinary fields of language processing, brain development, translation studies, and gender studies. So in addition to her academic pursuits, Professor Li is an experienced conference interpreter, as we have experienced the great expertise in conference interpretation, who provides services at local, national, and international levels, drawing rich insights from her interpreting practice and teaching experience. So together, Professor Li Defeng and Professor Victoria Li Liqing will give us a very in-depth analysis of the the topic is the exploring bilingual advantages, a longitudinal fMRI study with insights from neural imaging and behavioral data. Welcome.
Right. Good morning. I hope my PPT is here. Actually, just now, when Professor Jill was speaking, my student who's holding the right time is up board asked me, say, time is up. I said, let him speak, because he's exactly saying what I was about to say, leading to my, including some of the concluding remarks. Better listen to him. Here, I feel privileged to represent the group to introduce the project and some of our findings. And actually, we have a lot to report. This is a collaborative effort, interdisciplinary study that represents the effort of my colleagues. It's a project led by Professor Defeng Li, and it also represents the effort of my colleagues, my young colleagues, and my students. Right, actually, it's taken from a much larger project. The key, we started this exploration 3 years ago. So bilingual advantage is a debate that's been going on for over 100 years. So I think for those who are sitting here, we almost take it for granted that there is bilingual advantage because we all feel that we benefit from it. However, it's not exactly the case. It had been, but even for much of the 20th century, bilingualism is considered as a kind of disadvantage and can cause some confusion, even mental confusion for children. Then there's a turning point that was in the 1960s. So there's been discovery that showed that bilingualism yields to some cognitive advantages. However, the debate continued into the 21st century. So even recently, some studies failed to find evidence for the claimed bilingual advantage. And even in 2019, a core journal, Nature Human Behavior, published an article. There's a study, there's a survey, there's a longitudinal study that involved over 4,000 subjects. And the finding was there's no evidence for bilingual executive function advantage. However, whether say that there is advantage or disadvantage, there would be certain bias. So there's no consensus, and why there is no consensus? It might have to do with different methodology, inconsistent definition of monolingual and bilingual, because there are different levels of bilinguals. And sometimes the control of variables in certain studies and the study design, and it becomes difficult because the results cannot be easily compared. Then sometimes the sampling could be biased. If you say there's bilingual advantage in many places, that itself already represents privileged background.
say, people who can travel to different places, raised in different places, international experience, and that itself would represent a kind of privileged background. However, it's like this article published in Nature Human Behavior that represents the other end. Immigrants found that actually most of these subjects were from underprivileged background, immigrant family in America. So that involved disruptive childhood. So that could impair cognitive development. So here we try to join this debate. This journey started about 3 years ago because the university acquired the state-of-the-art MRI machine, and also we got colleagues joining us who brought advanced technology in MRI, including analytical methods, that's a surface-based brain atlas, and we try to have better control of research variables, including subject modes, languages, and so on. We thought the multilingual environment of Macau and also the more diverse and also fair educational system would facilitate us to do the sampling more adequately. So it's actually a much larger project that involves 3 phases and 3 languages. Here we only report a small part of it. Over the last 3 years, we did over 600 scans, and we tried to do more. Very importantly, we achieved a technical breakthrough. That what we all know that MRI has got noise, the scanner noise, so it becomes difficult for us to perform overt language perception and production. The scanner noise that could create difficulty for perception, and then scanner noise and, for example, motion. Artifacts would create noise for especially the production stage, and we managed to overcome that with say noise cancelling, and also we can. I'm going to show you examples and evidence of us doing that. So that is the setup. We managed to control head motion, including the mask. We call it the Phantom of Opera mask. That also involves, say, many sleepless nights in the MRI lab. So when other people are sleeping, not using the machine, and we would stay in the lab and experiment. We also got Professor Lee to experiment, to make sure that everything is safe. MRI is very safe, right? But also make sure that, especially at the earlier stage, whatever I do to the subjects, I do to myself first. So that's the setup. We managed to record the entire process, including reading, listening, and speaking, and trace the whole brain activation. And very importantly, with face this is the results, will show evidence of our ability to control noise, including head motion artifact. So this is the overall setup. Especially want to talk about this face encoded design, and that gives temporal resolution for MRI, because MRI is known to have very low temporal resolution that is not sufficient for studying the language processing that can be counted, that can be assessed by 100 milliseconds. Well, that is EEG, ERP. Most of the threshold, are represented by 100 milliseconds, and we managed to achieve that using MRI. Traditionally, there's say brain activation that is represented by blood flow. There is a delay of several seconds, and it is not linear. It fluctuates. However, with this face encoded design, we managed to get temporal resolution for MRI, which is very important for our study. And I will explain later. But for face encoded design, actually it's been around for about 30 years, go back to the 1990s. So we're not exactly dinosaurs. So here, and we'll just very quickly go through, we make use of results that's been developed, and methodology has been developed in the last 30 years. And that was started by Professor Marty Serino. The surface-based brain atlas. So we can say that we are actually standing on the shoulders of giants. And here, including, we have very privileged to have Professor Daniel Gill here, who is a pioneer in the field. And in MRI, we're also standing on the shoulders of giants. So this is the sound recording we get from the MRI. Does it play? Yes. Can you hear?
澳门政府再次强调疫苗的重要性。
This is from the scanner.
Macau government once again emphasized the importance of vaccine.
李明在整理翻译学科的相关文献。
Li Ming is organizing the relevant literature in translation studies.
Right, so this is recording from the scanner. They all can be transcribed and at the annotation, timestamp and everything, and analyzed. So that also becomes part of our audio corpora. Right. So to start this investigation to look at bilingual advantage, I come back to Professor Gill's effort model. So I presented this model to the scientists of our university. Right. So effort model. The left-hand side, that is Professor Gill's effort model for simultaneous interpreting. So simultaneous includes listening and analysis effort, short-term memory effort, speech production effort, and coordination effort. And the other side was, so that is bilingual advantage, bilingual activity. And on the right-hand side, model for shadowing. Shadowing is a monolingual activity. But however, if you look at this effort model, they all apply. So listening and analysis effort, short-term memory effort, speech production effort, and coordination effort, they're all there. So what's the difference? And what the difference is, there is language transfer. So where is language transfer? The good thing is, over the years, whenever I got a question in my head, Professor Gill, without even writing to Professor Gill, I already found an update on the released on the internet or in some publication. So Professor Gill explained that language transfer is actually there. It is at the perception stage, which is in the listening and analysis effort, there is language transfer. Well, please correct me if I got it wrong. Also, language transfer exists in the speech production effort. So actually, language transfer is in the effort models. So compare with shadowing, which is completely monolingual, but it contains all the efforts except for the language transfer. So we try to apply this. So we applied this effort models and try to look at bilingual advantage. For this experiment, we included 24 subjects, so 21 females and 3 males. It's very difficult to actually achieve absolute balance. Originally, we're trying to compare monolinguals and bilinguals. However, locally, it's almost impossible to find anyone who is really monolingual, who doesn't speak or hasn't been exposed to another language. And also, if you say monolingual and bilingual, they are similar in every other way, educational level and everything, except for the language not being bilingual and monolingual. It turns out that it's impossible. It's impossible to find a monolingual and a bilingual who are similar in all other ways. So we used bilinguals, and their level of second language, the level of proficiency in the first language, educational background, age, everything, all controlled. Say their age very similar, 23, 24 years old. They're all postgraduate students, and actually, say for a university like this and some other prestigious universities in China, for example, to get into a program like this, have been through the kind of selection. So in terms of level of intelligence, language proficiency, ability in every way, they'll be very similar. So although the sample size is small, still it can give us some useful insight. So that include whatever measures, whatever indicator, they had been explained in Professor G's presentation. But that includes, say, different indicators. Performance includes executive function tests, include, say, scanner, and recording from the scanner, neuroimaging data, and also NASA TXL. And also physiological data using BioPAC like heart rate, blood pressure, and so on. So before they started, so it's a longitudinal study, and all subjects would go through 60 hours of training over 30 days. So every day they will come into the SI lab and are monitored by teaching assistants. So they clock in to do 1 hour of simultaneous interpreting, L1 to L2, and then 1 hour L2 to L1. The other group divided into 2 groups. One group practiced simultaneous interpreting. The other group practiced shadowing. And shadowing 30 hours, say, in the mother tongue in Chinese, and 30 hours in English, which is L2. And then executive function tests, mostly we test the working memory, a series of working memory tests, including digit spent in both languages and also sentences in both languages. And then after the training session, they again went into the scanner and performed this and translated the sentences inside the scanner. And then the neuroimaging data were collected, and also the output were collected. The questions we try to answer is, can cross-language and cross-modality training foster brain plasticity? We're talking about structural change. Well, within just 1 month, it's not likely to happen. However, the dilemma would be if we make the training period too long, there will be some other factors that will come in, including the change in language proficiency. So we decided that training period, 1 month, is too short for structural change. However, it will induce functional change. The other question is, does simultaneous interpreting enhance executive function, cognitive ability? And the last question, that is to the heart of our community. Can shadowing improve executive function and boost simultaneous performance, simultaneous interpreting performance? So that is also a question that we try to explore. Here we have actually neuroimaging evidence. We also have behavioral evidence to support that. But before I present our results, also I come to, usually limitations come at the end of the presentation. However, here, I want to emphasize our limitation. For the neuroimaging analysis, we based our study on this neuroefficiency hypothesis. However, there are limitations because limitation identified as associated with task complexity. We set our experiments, actually the stimuli at different levels of difficulty. In this case, we only chose the easiest level because neuroefficiency hypothesis has been challenged. It's been indicated that there's evidence that it only applies for lower order activities. For higher order cognitive functions, so neuroefficiency hypothesis, it means that the more proficient you are, the better you are, the better you can make use of our neural resources, and therefore inducing less extensive brain activations. However, when the task complexity enhances, is a different way, probably just like performance. The larger the activation, the stronger the activation, the better the performance. The more experienced the interpreter, the larger and the stronger the activation. But that is for a different presentation. So the results that we compare, the results is there was functional changes. So we see whether the brain activation happened faster. So the left-hand side is simultaneous interpreting, and this is for simultaneous interpreting, L1 to L2. So whether the brain activation was faster after training or slower after training or no change. And brain activation, is the size bigger? We're not talking about amplitude, or is it smaller or no change? It turns out that the brain activation slower for those who went through simultaneous training, right? Very few, but it happens. But just like we're human beings, say our performance every day will be different, and our brain cannot be exactly the same every day, and every brain is different. But we'll also look at the average. So shadowing, it seems that there's even more benefit for shadowing. Brain activation, in terms of brain activation speed and the size of brain activation, looks like shadowing got even more benefit. So we analyzed all the brain activation maps. So this is simultaneous interpreting. The top left is pre-training. The right-hand side is post-training. And the color code is red is the fastest, followed by blue, and the slowest is green. And you can see the pre-training, there's a lot more green, and after training, is more blue. The next one, pre-training, more extensive activation. After training, less extensive activation. This one, more or less the same. This one, before training, slower. After training, faster, and also less extensive activation. This one, after training, less extensive activation. This one, after training, more extensive activation and slower. And this one, more or less the same. This one, less extensive activation. So that is for simultaneous interpreting. The same we did for shadowing. So neuroimaging result indicate that there is benefit. There is functional change after training. So brain activation pre-training, slower and more extensive activation, and post-training, less extensive activation. Here we have marked the brain region related to language activities that includes the ITG, the language areas, the ITG, the ATL, AIC, STS. They are associated with language processing. Say ITG represents higher level cognitive functions, including visual and language comprehension and emotion regulation, and ATL, semantic memory. AIC, emotional feelings, and STS for language perception, and so on. We also marked the cognitive function regions that includes the RMFG, the DIPFC, the IPL. That's, well, mostly, they all have to do with working memory. And the RMFG also got to do with coordination inhibitory. DIPFC also got to do with inhibitory control, and so on. This is one of the brains. In the middle, I want to point out that's the lip, and see whether the pointer works. Yes, the lip. Of course, you will have to move. And after training, less effort there. The way we control the head motion is to make sure that only the lips is moving, and make sure the muscles and so on, those movements will be limited. However, when we all average, if you look at the two maps, just with our naked eyes, we cannot really identify the difference. However, if we look at the whole brain activation, the curve, the lighter blue one, that is post-training. For simultaneous interpreting, it means that the activation is earlier, the activation is faster. And then for some shadowing, also the activation is faster. We have to say that within the scanner, actually the activity is the same. Consecutive interpreting of sentences inside the scanner. So the activity the same, but the ones who went through simultaneous interpreting training, right, the brain went faster. Those who went through shadowing training, the brain ran faster as well as they were translating sentences. As they look at executive functions, especially look at working memory, both groups are practicing improved in terms of executive function, especially working memory. And the thing is, the group who did shadowing improved even more in terms of working memory. So they both improved, but those who did shadowing improved even more. And now we look at simultaneous interpreting performance. So outside the scanner, we also make them interpret passages from Chinese to English, English to Chinese, and the level of difficulty all controlled. And before training and after training, of course, simultaneous well, it turns out that they both improved, both groups improved in simultaneous interpreting performance. So those who practice shadowing also improved in simultaneous interpreting performance. Although those who practice simultaneous interpreting actually got advantage in displayed advantages in terms of language transfer, all tasks or all indicators associated with language transfer. However, those who only practice shadowing improve more in terms of language quality. Right. So shadowing, even some dismiss it as useless for translation for simultaneous interpreting training, has been valued by foreign language teaching that it would improve foreign language, second language delivery. The other part that those who practice shadowing outperform those who practice simultaneous interpreting was native voice, native accent. So not surprising if they were shadowing and the L2, that obviously improved their accent in L2. So this is about what I've got to report and what I think the time limit for June. Yes, I'm still doing okay. Well, I'm speaking too fast. I hope you heard me. But right, I am just too eager to report everything. And this, as I emphasize, this is taken from a much larger project. And the other thing that I would like to show is the University of Macau Brain Atlas, which is one of the product of our project. And here I will try to right. Actually, there is a movie showing you the movement of brain activation. We hope to share this with the international community. So for each activity, whether it's L1 or L2, or whether it's just speaking only, or well, simultaneous interpreting, we can map the brain activation. We can also indicate the the time and the speed. So you log into the system, you can actually see, get access to these brains, and also the parcellation, the brain parcellation, the functional areas are marked. Here I would like to show you our team. All those fancy graphics, movies, and so on, they are not done automatically. This is not automatically generated by some fancy software. Of course, that involves some sophisticated, very innovative software, and involving the work of several very talented computer programmer. But also, there's a large part of it involves very labor-intensive analytical work done by our young researchers, and you will see them around here. A couple of them would do a presentation, but they each all have their own project. This is their contribution to the larger project. So the left-hand side, we got the neuroimaging group, and the right-hand side, we got the group analyzing the speech corpus. You can see some overlapping between the two. So some actually did both neuroimaging analysis and speech corpus and analysis. This is our team. The funding information. So do we have time for Q&A?
The time is really short. 10 minutes left. So let's proceed with QA session. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'll give you the mobile microphone. Where's the microphone? Thank you, Vicky. If we have any questions, you can refer to Vicky during the tea break. Thank you. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you for your wonderful PowerPoint. It's really full of power and points. So great. So the study indeed offers us a refreshing perspective on the ongoing debate about that bilingual advantage and its implication for executive functions. So the lecture provides fresh insights into the impact of these training methods on executive function enhancement and interpreting skills development. So thank you again, Vicky. Thank you. And just take the, please. Professor Chen will chair the next.
Is there coffee break?
Keynote speaker.
There is coffee break. No coffee break. All right. Thank you very much, Professor Zhu Xianlong. And now may I introduce the chair for. Thank you very much, Professor Zhu Xianlong. And now may I introduce the chair for the next keynote session, Professor Chen Kefang. Professor Chen Kefang is from Zhejiang Yuexiu University. Yes. Chen Kefang. Yes. Professor Chen. Now the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's my greatest honor to chair the next two speeches. But I have to tell you that due to the delayed delivery of our coffee break, we'll have to wait a little bit longer for that. So we'll have Professor Chen Jing to talk first. Okay. There's a traffic jam caused by the car racing held in Macau. Sorry for that. I was here in 2014 with the first IATIC conference. I was working my second postdoc under the supervision of Professor Defeng Li and had the honor of participating in the organizing work of the first conference. And since then, I have been frequenting the activities or events hosted or held at the University of Macau. And this year is the 10th conference, and it is a big occasion and a special occasion. And today we have several very important model initiators, Professor Daniel Gilles, the effort model, and Professor Chen Jing, the Xiamen model, and Professor Zong Weihe, the Guangwei model. So let me have the honor of introducing Professor Chen Jing to you. She is Professor and Dean of the College of Foreign Languages and Cultures at Xiamen University. She is the Deputy Director of the Interpreting Committee for the Translators Association of China, TAC. Deputy Director for the Translators Association and the Foreign Languages Association of Fujian Province. And she has published extensively as an outstanding in interpreting. So let's warmly welcome Professor Chen Jing.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Chen. I will surely cut short my presentation so everybody can have the tea break in time. Good morning. I feel truly delighted and honored to be invited to this esteemed conference. Thank you, Professor Li Defeng, for your kind introduction, for your kind invitations. Sorry. And even though I could not take up the previous two, these invitations have given me gorgeous opportunities to think, to learn, to enter the field, and to think more deeply about cognitive dimensions in interpreting with great interests. And this interest has been intensified by a very big event in my institution, that is the establishment of language Cognition and Intelligence Lab. And everything is timely, and I believe everything will be timeless. In my talk, I'm going to review the evolution of CIS, Cognitive Interpreting Studies. And I'm going to focus a little bit on the study of interpreting reception and cognitive reception studies of interpreting. Let's first of all have a look at the definition. CIS can be defined as a research realm devoted to studying cognitive aspects on production, reception, interaction of all participants in interpreted communication. And the people believe interpreting has an older cognitive research tradition. Let's see how it got started. In 1930, Spanish psychologists, Sons Jesuits, published an article discussing the cognitive ability and the stress of conference interpreters, which, according to our corpus, was the earliest cognitive interpreting research. And in the 1960s and the 70s, psychologists and psycholinguists became very keen to studying simultaneous interpreting, some aspects of simultaneous interpreting, such as multitasking and EVS, through experiments. And the first doctoral dissertation on cognitive interpreting was produced by Barrick in 1969, which was entitled as A Study of Simultaneous Interpretation. So in the next decades, interpreting research has been drawing on the theories and the methods of cognitive science and has achieved a large number of interdisciplinary results. In order to provide a good picture of the development of CIS, we are basing our review on the following databases and online resources of Chinese and English translation studies produced from 1950 till present. Let's go into some details. This is how the corpus is composed, including journal articles, book chapters, books, doctoral dissertations in both English and Chinese. And this chart shows a clear upward trend in terms of the time spans, the statistics across the time spans. And from 1950 and 1969, as we can see here, there were actually very few publications. And the 1990s saw a surge in English researchers. A noticeable increase occurred in the Chinese publications in the first decade of the 21st century, and even more so in the second decade. So by 2019, the number of Chinese publications was at the same level as that of English. And it's very interesting to note, during the 5-year period from 2020 to 24, just last month, the amount of research produced in the West is as much as that produced in the previous 10 years, from 2010 to 2019, indicating a very sharp increase. But we cannot see very obvious increase with Chinese researchers, at least for the moment. Let's see how the researchers are focused on. For the English literature, the 10 most discussed topics are information processing, interpreters' role, memory, social-cultural factors, modeling, cognitive load, ability, training, strategies, and review. And for the Chinese, information processing, review, memory, training, strategy, modeling, pressure, the interpretive theory, ability, technology, and cognition. And if we compare the two, we can see Chinese researchers focus much more on the interpretive theory, training strategy than English publications, while attaching much less attention to interpreters' role, cognitive load, and memory than English researchers. And these differences also exist with the research methods adopted. For the English researchers, experiments account for the largest proportion, followed by surveys and a speculative study and review, and mixed methods. And for the Chinese literature, speculative study occupied the largest proportion, followed by experiments, surveys. And if we combine the two, we can see experiments and surveys are the two most commonly used methods. And for experiments, studies using eye tracking account for 20%, and brain imaging technology account for 15%, which are thought to be the two most used tools. How about experimental subjects then? Professional interpreters and student interpreters are the two major groups of experimental subjects. And differences also exist between the English literature and the Chinese. For English researchers, professional interpreters account for the largest proportion, half of them. While for the Chinese researchers, student interpreters account for 45.9% of the total. What's also revealed is the authorship. Chinese authors are many scholars from universities. Nearly all of them are in the field of translation and interpreting, sometimes in collaboration with psychologists. And English authorship is composed of university scholars and practitioners, sometimes in collaboration with psychologists and neuroscientists. Next, I'm going to focus on interpreting reception and cognitive reception studies of interpreting a little bit. This is a very important issue, but has not been paid enough attention to. And it is important because interpreting is an act of communication which attempts to relay across cultural and linguistic boundaries, another act of communication. And what is involved is a very complex, multi-layered, dynamic process through which meaning is exchanged. So, if the ideal function of the interpreter is to ensure smooth communication between the primary parties, then his role should be to adjust the culturally determined peculiarities of the source text to the culturally determined expectations of the receiver. Otherwise, communication failure or breakdown occurs, and this highlights interpreting reception. Reception or effect of translation and interpreting indicates a shift of the focus from the text or the speech and the author or the speaker to the reader or the audience. And it also indicates a shift of focus from a linguistically oriented approach towards the study of translation within the receiving culture. And since the beginning of this century, more and more researchers have begun to pay attention to the issue of translation reception, which falls into the categories of cognitive reception, affective reception, behavioral reception, and social cultural reception. And let's focus on cognitive reception a little bit. The concept of cognitive reception studies of translation was first proposed in 2017. aiming to examine the impact of translated and interpreted products on the cognitive dimensions of receivers within the target culture. And the issues discussed mainly include the receiver's perception, attention allocation, memory formation, executive control functions, processing speed, and so on and so forth. For interpreting studies, the study of reception is of equal importance because interpreting is distinguished from other type of translational activities by its being here and now. And the nature of being here and now decides the real audience is worthy of more attention and interest. But in our corpus, there are only 199 researches on cognitive reception of translation and interpreting, occupying only 20% of the total, while for cognitive reception of interpreting, there are only 48 researchers, occupying only 4.87% of the total, indicating very limited research attention. And these researchers mainly discuss end users' reaction to the interpreting performance, audience comprehension of interpreting, users' expectations and perception of the quality. In order to gain a deeper insight into the research focus, we generated a word cloud based on the keywords. And for the Chinese literature, what's prominent are psychological tendencies, expectancy dimension, cognitive domain, audience psychology, cognitive psychology, and interpreting stands out as a key concept. And for the word cloud derived from the English literature, we can see more focused themes. And what's prominent is audio-visual translation, including dubbing, subtitling, and audio description. And the issues discussed include user comprehension, cognitive load, memory, attention, and again, eye tracking is a major tool used. To wrap up, I'm going to share with you some thoughts. First of all, as an interdisciplinary research branch, CIS or CRR is aiming more and more to promote interpreting studies by delving into the cognitive aspects of production, reception, and interaction in interpreted communication. We all believe the reference to any discipline should ensure the core position of interpreting and avoid making it a testing ground for other disciplines. Second, lack of diversity in research methods is a concern. As AI is changing the world and emerging technologies are reshaping translation studies and the cognitive translation studies and the cognitive interpreting studies, it is imperative for us to integrate tools such as eye tracking, EEG, EDA, so on and so forth, in order to provide deeper insights into the cognition underlying interpreting process. Moreover, research methods combining online methods like eye tracking and EEG with offline methods like questionnaire, surveys, interviews, observations, and tests is and will be the future trend. Thirdly, more attention should be paid to reception studies. As there exists an intertwined relationship in the cognitive dimensions between producing and receiving in the translation process, we need to conduct more research to reception studies in order to reflect the intricate reciprocal relationship between interpreters' decision-making processes and the receiver's responses and expectations. Lastly, social attributes deserve more attention. As we all believe, internal and external factors affect translation during the translation process. But unfortunately, we can see much less researches conducted on external factors than on internal factors. We need to conduct more researches in order to explore more the social attributes, the humanistic interpretation of the data and results, the cognition related to the social and cultural context, and also the impact of interpreting behavior on interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chen. I feel overwhelmed by the high podium here, so it's safer for me to stand here. Thank you, Professor Chen, for a very enlightening speech. She, first of all, made an overview of the interpreting studies and pointed out the fact that not many Chinese scholars, or at least the number of Chinese publications by Chinese scholars is not big enough compared with the other international publications. So it is underrepresented in this field, which means Chinese teachers who are working with interpreting studies still can keep their job. We still have a lot to do. And Professor Chen also pointed out some very important directions for us to work on, like the reception studies, which is an important issue, lack of diversity in research methods. So empirical methods should be, or tools should be more applied to interpreting fields. And the social attributes are also very important. We have to consider more on the social cultural aspects of interpreting. So thank you very much, Professor Chen. And I think before we have the coffee break, Frank has a few announcements to make. So please, Frank.
Thank you very much. 各位专家非常感谢，因为今天正逢1年1度的格兰披治大赛车，所以呢，我们的茶歇姗姗来迟，感谢大家的等待。今天这个天气也非常好，我们的气氛也非常的棒，所以呢，现在我们邀请各位专家移步到我们大门的茶歇，另外还有我们的签名墙，请大家留下专家各位的大名。好，欢迎，谢谢大家。Now is the tea break. Now is the coffee break. We will come back at 11:35. 我们11:35的时候回来。谢谢大家，谢谢。
我把你们的茶歇弄来了，对不对？感谢我是您，是您把它叫来。我不上去抢茶歇就不来。
给把这个给打，澳门大学，然后呢看着怎么站？要不我们是这么站，我们弄几张不一样的哈。我们先站在前面，
好，
然后我们两边各边站一个，然后再试试看怎么样。然后我们站前面的。
我还以为要看大屏幕。
哎，您看，这已经出来了 ，profiling。
哦，对对对，就这个。
我看它都放哪儿了 ，copy 一下。
25分钟讲不完呢。
对，没事，他们应该应该是提前结束的，应该就这个。要不给您换一下名字，就是 Professor 谭业生。
可以，好的。
翻译笔在那边，他是。
好，可以的。
行吧。
行，
好，应该
好的，能看到，好的。
下午非得会帮您再次发一下。
好的，好。行，好，谢谢。
您吃点东西，休息一下。
待会儿喝点水就行了。
咖啡怎么样？
对。老黄进去。
好，已经可以了。
好，谢谢啊。
您赶快去茶歇。好的。
位嘉宾、各位 Professor， 我们下半场会议即将开始，大家可以入座。Dear guests, dear professors, please have a seat. Our second half meeting is already.
然后那个移动话筒，老岳，给我递个移动话筒。Ladies and gentlemen, would you please come back to your seats? Frank, 我们可以开始。Okay, we will have the last speaker of this morning, Professor Wang Jiehua. It is my greatest honor to introduce him to you. Professor Wang is a professor and a doctoral supervisor at the School of Foreign Languages, Renmin University. Since receiving his PhD from Beijing Normal University in 2003, he has been working there. He holds academic roles as the Vice Chairman of the Language Cognition and Intelligent Development Professional Committee of the Chinese Society for Language Modernization and the Vice President of the Cognitive Translation Professional Committee of the Chinese Association for Comparative Studies of English and Chinese. He has very impressive publications and high-level projects. Now, the podium is yours, Professor Wang. Please.
Okay, good morning, distinguished professors, ladies and gentlemen. Well, great thanks to Professor Defeng Li for your very kind invitation. That's my second time came here 10 years later, because I participated in the first conference of this one here 10 years ago. 10 years passed, all things changed. But Professor Defeng Li has no change. Still young, energetic, and full of ideas. Here's also some changes. And this research team become bigger and bigger. I remember 10 years ago, when we came here for the first conference, a very small venue, conference venue. But today, very large. And also, many distinguished professors, legendary professors came here today. Well, today, I will focus on the topic of influence of semantic cognition of textual context on student interpreters' performance, okay? And I think this morning's keynote speeches is very thoughtfully arranged. 2 keynote speeches focus on the, theoretical structural construction, and the other 2, one is Defeng Li's empirical study, and also my speech will also focus on empirical study. And well, when I submitted the abstract, and my team did the research with 50 senior bachelor students interpreting performance. But in the final submission of my PPT, I changed my research, participants and subjects. I did the tests or experiments on 13 student interpreters of MI students in Renda. The 13 students, they passed the admission test with the interpreting test. And also, all the students 1 month ago, they participated in the CAT-2 interpreting test. And normally, the students of MI in Renda can pass the CAT-2 interpreting test. But only one student, she's an international student. She came from Italy, and her native language is Italian. And her Chinese, because her parents are overseas Chinese, and she was born in Italy, but her Chinese was not so good. But she passed our exam and came to be an MS student here in Renda. So the 13 students were the subjects that we have this test. Well, at the beginning, let's have the introduction of the research background. Semantic cognition refers to the interpreter's cognitive process of understanding, organizing, and constructing semantic content to ensure accuracy and fluency in interpretation. When interpreting complex texts, particularly student interpreters often face cognitive challenges with complex syntax and unfamiliar vocabulary, or we can say technical terms, which may directly impact their interpreting performance. Well, research questions here. To what extent do different text themes, difficult technical terms, and syntactic structures affect students' interpreting performance? And second, do student interpreters perform better with certain text themes? If so, what cognitive base underlies this phenomenon? The significance of the study highlights the importance of semantic cognition interpreting pedagogy, and also analyze how different text themes affect students' performance. Well, literature review. And in the previous keynote speeches, such as Gilles, talked about cognitive load. Now, cognitive load is the amount of working memory resources that are used. And these working memory resources are limited. And cognitive load theory has been mainly developed to design learning instructions where work-related tasks and use the mental workload concept. You can see our brain, our information processing capacity is limited, and how to balance, how to divide our cognitive capacity is a critical challenge for interpreters. And also information processing model, we have sensory memory, we have working memory and long-term memory. And just now I remember Jael mentioned for interpreters, two things are very important. One is your knowledge, another one is your skill. Well, long-term memory, in other words, is our knowledge in our brain. And long-term memory serves as a kind of, a reminder to our understanding of the information that we hear. And three types of cognitive load exist. One is extrinsic. It defines how information is presented and acquired. And the intrinsic one, it corresponds to the complexity of the acquired knowledge without a reference to how it is presented and acquired. And then the germane cognitive load. It defines knowledge integration in long-term memory. Well, the themes of practice, any theme of a text has to do with the concept, activity, and cognition. And we can see from this map, the theme in the center, in the core, it is supported by the three pillars. One is concept, another one is activity, and then cognition. When you cognize it, you will have the activity, such as this kind of conference here. When you first come to attend this conference, all things are new to you. But when you come here to attend, to participate in the conference for the second or third time, you will know, you can cognize it. And you then will have your activities. You will know, oh, what should I do? So this map tells us theme is very important. In our interpreting, the theme of the context influences your performance. But how does it influence? And we will have more of the literature review. If we want to know how it influences our performance, we'll have the standards for assessing or evaluating our interpreting quality. Normally, when we evaluate the quality of interpreting, we pay much attention to the accuracy. And then we will consider the fluency. And the two indicators are very important. For simultaneous interpreting, according to experts, maybe according to Professor Zhong or according to Professor Chen, in simultaneous interpreting, accuracy maybe account for at least 60%, but for consecutive interpreting, the accuracy for the percentage of it will be maybe 90% or no less than 80. That's for practitioners, for professional interpreters. But for the student interpreters, maybe there's a range of the percentage of the accuracy and the fluency in our evaluation. For translation quality, for the influential factors, we have the style of the text that we hear, the theme, and also we have innate, the terminology, and the variety, and also complexity of a sentence structure, and all will play the role influencing our translation or interpreting quality. Well, for our empirical study here, 25 minutes after the coffee break, and it's close to 12 o'clock for the noon, for the lunch. I will talk quickly. I will now talk about our experiment design I will present to you, report to you our result of the research. Data collection. The data for this study comes from 13 student interpreters enrolled in interpreting courses who participated in this interpreting tests. And the test passages consisted of 4 Chinese paragraphs, covering a variety of themes, including difficulty factors like technical terms and long, difficult sentences, and also the numbers, To ensure the reliable assessment, these three experienced interpreting instructors rated each passage and evaluating elements such as the theme, number of technical terms, and the complex sentences, and the audio duration, and total word count, and also sentence count. Well, the textual variable is one, the factor that we consider too much, Then the sub-factors, the theme, terminology, numbers, complex sentences, and also audio duration. And then we have the performance metrics. We have fluency, accuracy in translating technical terms, complex sentences, and the voice volume, and also passage completeness, interpreting time, number of missing words, and also number of missing sentences. Well, we conduct a statistical significant test to investigate how textual variable influence interpreting performance. And we have the annual SPSS test, well, the data analysis, okay. You can see here, we have 4 types of texts with 4 different themes. And one text is about law, about the civil code, the legal text. And second one is a text of science and technology. And third one is about sports text. And the last one is a cultural text. The legal text just now I told you is about civil code, 民法典. And second one, science and technology, is about AI technology. And third one, sports text, is about 2022 Beijing Winter Olympic Game. The last one, cultural text, is about Chinese cuisine. It's full of, difficult terms such as 宫保鸡丁, 鱼香肉丝. Students feel it difficult to interpret in a very short period of time, And then we have the number of figures for the text of ST with more terminologies, but students can deal with them easily. Nowadays, for the interpreting students, the MS students, they pay much attention to number translation, number interpreting. They pay much to science and technology development, but they pay less to the cultural aspects, such as the Chinese festivals. When you read to students a passage about Chinese, the boat racing holiday, it's difficult for them to interpret, the full of, terms. And also complexity in sentence structure. Well, for the sports text in 2022 Beijing Winter Olympic Game, for this passage, there's no long sentences. Well, when you watch a soccer game, you will feel, the reporter will report to you with short sentences and let you understand very quickly. And even the speaker has very high speed of, sentence production, Well, for sports text, there's zero complexity in sentence structure. But for the ST text, with 4 complex sentences, and also very difficult. Then we have the assessment standard. We try to ensure the validity and reliability of the assessment. 3 experienced professional interpreters score the student performances. We set the fluency with 30%. And we said the accuracy is 70% for the consecutive interpreting. Why we have a little bit low percentage of the accuracy? Because they are student interpreters. If we, for the professional ones, we will set a higher percentage of accuracy. Well, you can see here for the rate of the scores for the quality assessment, we can see that for the 13 subjects, the first one performs not so good in the 4 theme of texts. For the legal text, 84. For the ST text is 67. For the support text is 60. For the cultural one, also 60. Because these subjects, just now I told you, is an international student. Her native language is Italian, and Chinese language is a second language, foreign language, maybe. And also English is the third language. He tried to transfer from the second to the third to the second, Well, for the time for the student interpreters to finish the task, we can see, well, for each, this is a within group test. For each text, we can see the 13 participants, they interpreted the time for the legal text, all the 13 subjects, and with 53.8% of the students, they use time, they consume time more than the average time. For the cultural text, 69.2%, they use time more than the average time of each of the group, So you can see the cultural one is the most difficult one. Then we have the comparison test. We can see that for the legal one, legal text, this theme, it has a very significant difference with the sports one. And for the sports one, it has a very significant difference with other 3 themes of texts. So, and also for the cultural one, also the comparison test, we can see with the sports one, there's a significant difference. And for the ST theme of text, also there is a significant difference with the sports one. So we can draw the conclusion that the sports text, this kind of theme of the text, for students to perform, they did better than the other 3 themes of text, Why? This kind of phenomena, we try to analyze it. We will find that from the, just now I told you, for the sports one, there's no complexity of the sentence structure, there's 0. But for the other 3, they have 2, 3, or 4 long and complex sentences. So the complex sentences will impact the students' interpreting performance the biggest or the largest, And also the number. Well, for the ST theme of text, we have 18 terms. But students can't do good. Why? Just now I told you, nowadays students, they collected in their brain, they store a lot of the new terms in science and technology. And terminology really influences our interpreting performance. I remember the last week when the former Deputy General Secretary visited our university, one of our vice presidents received him, and I was there with them. this vice president is a professor in business administration. And he introduced to the former deputy general secretary that 人民大学特别重视实践教学，我们采用了芝加哥案例库的教学方法，我们运用沙盘教学法。And then I see that it's very difficult for the interpreter to deal with 沙盘。Nowadays, in many universities, for the vice president, if they are they were born in the 70s, they are good with English. They can understand the speakers, the native English speakers, but they cannot, speak English is not so good. For the interpreter, the task is to just interpret from Chinese into English. Well, when the interpret, finished the Shapan in English, and the vice president pointed out that, no, you interpreted wrong. So the terminology really, in sometimes is an obstacle to our interpreting quality, And at that time, I want to say something to help the interpreter, but, a very formal occasion, and I had to keep silent, Well, we can see the terminology. If the students, they stored in a normal time of learning, they try to collect the build up their, word bank of the terminology of one theme or one field of knowledge, they can perform better in their interpreting process, And we can see in this one the complex structure. Just as I told you, for the sports one, the complexness only, no complexness, they are all short sentences, easy to understand. But for the ST, 4 long complex sentences. But we can see that still the sports one, this theme of text, for this one, the interpreters can do better. Yeah. There's a significant difference, And also the last one, impact of semantic content, and we have the variable of the semantic content. Then we have the sub-factor of 3, terminology, numbers, and also complex sentences, Well, our findings through this empirical study, it reveals through empirical study that the significant impact of semantic cognition on student interpreter's performance. And second, differentiate how each factor influences cognitive load during interpretation. It demonstrates that semantic familiarity plays a crucial role in reducing cognitive load and thereby improving both the fluency and accuracy of interpreted content. The last one, it provides a scientific base for interpreter training and for the practical skill development of student interpreters. Well, from our, for our TI research, nowadays our country, the government pay much attention to the education, especially the higher education. We train, we educate students. We must try to meet the demand of our national strategic development. And for our research, we need to transfer our research result to our educational tools, educational method to train or educate the students better. Well, from this empirical study, we can see we have pedagogical recommendations. For interpreter training, we must incorporate the practice with materials from diverse themes, with a particular emphasis on complex sentence structures and specialized terminology. And second, We must familiarize students with a variety of semantic texts and adapt to the demands of diverse textual environments and improve the overall interpreting skills. And of course, we have the limitation of this research. We have a very small sample size, only 13 students with one international students, not so good from, in Chinese knowledge or understanding. And then in the future, we'll try to have a more analysis of more themes, and to increase the generalization or generalizability of the conclusions. Okay. Well, that's my report of the very small sample size of empirical study. I hope in future our group can do more. This one is a little primitive comparing with Defeng Li's FMR and FNIR, and we have eye tracking. But I think for students to use those kind of cutting edge technologies, the basic is we know how to design a test, we know how to collect data, and then we can do better. Okay, that's my report. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Wang, for a very clear presentation of an empirical study they did to observe the influence of thematic cognition of textual context on student interpreters' performances. Thank you very much. He explained how their design, how their approach, their experiment was designed, and how data were collected and analyzed, and emphasizing on the importance of diverse themes, or the importance of familiarization with the variety of different texts. Because he already did a very clear explanation, I don't want to add feet to a snake. So let me be brief. If you want to know more or have further discussion with him, you can either go to Renmin University or attend our following IATIC conferences. I'm sure Professor Li would invite Professor Wang to come here often, come to our conferences often. And this year's conference has a very obvious emphasis on interpreting studies, and I personally enjoyed all the speeches and the talks this morning. And without further ado, I think it's time for lunch. So please follow our student volunteers. Oh, sorry, Bing Han has something to announce. He's the Secretary General. Please, Bing Han. Oh, you can use that.
Thank you very much, and sorry for a little bit delay of your lunch time, but I'll try to be quick. Just a very brief announcement, because the committee of IATIC, International Association of Translation, Interpreting and Cognition, is planned to extend our committee member. So any of you who are joining this conference, if you want to join our committee, we are encouraging you to send 150 words to introduce yourself and justify why you want to join the committee, and together with a CV, send it to Professor Fen Jia, our Deputy Secretary General, and we will discuss it and release it vote it in this evening, this night's committee annual meeting. Okay, so yeah, try to join us. Exactly.
I think Professor Chen was referring to the International Association for Translation, Interpreting, and Cognition. So if you would like to be part of this, association, you can send a message to Fenjia. I'm sure you can find her email. Oh no, her WeChat in the WeChat group. Okay, so send your 150 words, introduction, and then sort of justification why we should, consider you as or make you a member of the association. Thank you very much.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's lunchtime. We have arranged all the volunteers on the way from here to the W23 Chen Yutong College for lunch. Inside your material bag, inside your bag, especially inside this notebook, there are 2 lunch coupons. Yeah, we have already placed lunch coupons there. For today, when you arrive at the lunch place, present one of the coupons. We will have lunch over there. We have volunteers along the way. Just follow their lead. Okay, thank you very much. For the afternoon session, for the afternoon parallel sessions, the sessions start at 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. You can find all the details in the conference program. 2 o'clock. After the parallel session, please come back to this auditorium for more keynote speeches. For those who have not registered yet, in the afternoon keynote session or before the keynote session, we have another coffee break. Please come to us for registration. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch. See you in the